This is J. Krishnamurti's fifth public talk at Amsterdam, 1968.
I believe this is the last talk, at least for this year. As one observes what is happening in the world, the chaos, the confusion, and the brutality of man to man, which no religions or social order or perhaps disorder has been able to prevent, as one observes the activities of the politicians and the economists and the social reformers right throughout the world, they've brought more and more confusion, more and more misery. Religions, that is, the organized belief, have certainly in no way helped to bring order, deep, abiding happiness to man. Nor has any utopias, whether the communist or those minority groups who have formed communities, have they brought any deep, lasting clarity to man. And one observes right throughout the world, one needs a tremendous revolution, a great change is necessary. We do not mean the revolution of the communists, of the socialists, or of any other kind outwardly, but we mean by a revolution at the psychological level of man, inward revolution, which obviously, if there is such a revolution, is the only hope, is the only, if one can use the word, salvation for man. Not ideologies. They have brought brutality. They have brought various forms of killing, wars. Ideologies, however noble, are really quite ignoble. And there must be a total mutation in the very structure of our brain cells, in the very structure of thought. And to bring about such deep, lasting mutation, revolution or change, one needs a great deal of energy. The drive, the sustained, constant intensity. Not a casual interest, or passing enthusiasm, which brings us about a certain quality of energy, but that energy is soon dissipated. What one needs to really bring this change at the psychological level, inside the skin, as it were, in the human being. We need energy, force, intensity, drive. And that energy, man has hoped to come by through resistance, through constant discipline, imitation, conformity. You can see that in the religious orders throughout the world. Or those people who have committed themselves to a particular ideology. They hope by believing, acting according to an idea, an ideology, or dedicating themselves to a particular belief or doctrine, dogma. One hopes to derive that intense quality of energy which is necessary to bring about a radical change in the human mind and heart. And again, that resistance, conformity, discipline, mere adjustment to an idea has not given man that necessary energy, force. So one has to find a different action that will bring this necessary energy. The more one acts as we do in this present structure of society, in our relationship between man and man, the more we act, the less energy. For in that action there is contradiction. A fragmentation. And so that action brings conflict and therefore waste of energy. One has to find this energy that is sustaining, that is constant, that does not fade away. And I think there is such an action which brings this vital quality which is necessary for deep, radical revolution in the mind. For us, action, that is to do, to be active. Action is, for most of us, is according to an idea, a formula, or a concept. If you will observe your own activities, your own daily movement in action, you will see that you have formulated an idea or an ideology, and according to that, you act. So there is a division between the idea of what you should do or what you should be, how you should act, and actual action. You can see that in yourself very clearly. So, action is always approximating itself to the formula, to the concept, to the ideal. So there is a division, a separation between what should be and what is, which causes duality, and therefore there is conflict. Please, as we said the other day, and at all the talks that have been here, please not merely listen to a series of words. Words have no meaning in themselves. Words have never brought about any change in man radically. You can pile up words, make a garland of them, as most of us do, and live on words, but they are ashes. They do not bring beauty in life. Words do not bring love. And if you are merely listening this evening to a series of ideas or words, then I'm afraid you will go empty-handed. But whereas, if you would listen, not only to the speaker, but to listen to your own thoughts, listen to the way of your life, listen to what is being said, not as something outside of you, but which is actually taking place within you. Then you will see the reality of what is being said, or the falseness of what is being said. One has to say for oneself, not through somebody else, what is true and what is false. And to find that out, you have to listen. You have to give care, affection, attention, which means you have to be very serious. And the world or life demands that we be serious. Because it is only to the mind that is very serious there is life, there is an abundance of life. But not to the curious, not to the intellectual, not to the emotionalist or the sentimentalist. So, when we are talking about action, for life is action, all living is action, all relationship is action. And when one observes that movement of action within oneself, one sees there is this division between what should be, what is the ideal, and what the actual action is. Most of our action is the outcome of an idea, an ideal, a belief, a supposition, a formula. And therefore, there is this division, and in this division there is the approximation, trying to come as close to the ideal as possible. In that there is conflict, and this conflict is waste of energy. That is the very source of wastage of energy. Action means the doing, acting in the living present. And when action is according to a pattern, then action is not in the present, it is according to the past or according to a future. And therefore, in that action, there is confusion, there is conflict. Do please see this very simple fact. And in that, there is a tremendous wastage of energy. That is the basic, fundamental distortion of energy. Which is to act according to a principle, to a belief, to an ideology, and is their action without the formula. I hope the question is clear. That is, when action, which is always in the living present, active present, if that action is an approximation or trying to get as close to the ideal as possible, then there is conflict. And that conflict is the essential waste of energy. And we need tremendous energy to bring about a psychological change in ourselves as human beings. Because we have lived far too long in a world of make-believe, in a world of brutality, violence, despair, anxiety, and to live humanly, sanely. One has to have a change, and to bring about a change within oneself, and therefore within the society. One needs this radical energy. For the individual is not different from the society. The society is the individual, and the individual is the society. And to bring a necessary, radical, essential change in the structure of society, which is corrupt, which is immoral. There must be change in the human heart and mind. And to bring about that change, you need great energy. And that energy is denied or perverted or twisted when you act according to a concept, which is what we do in our daily life. The concept based on a past history or based on some conclusion. So it is not action at all. It is an approximation to a formula. So one asks, if there is an action which is not based on an idea, on a conclusion, which are all the things that has been dead. So we're going to find out, if you will, work together this evening, together, not merely listen to the speaker. Work together, cooperate together to find out if there is an action that brings more and more energy, not less and less. There is such action. In stating that, it is not a creation of another idea. One has to find out that action for oneself. And to find out, one has to begin right at the beginning of our human behavior, of our human quality of mind. That is, we are never alone. You may be walking in the wood by yourself, but you're not alone. You may be with your family, in society, but the human mind is so conditioned by past experience, knowledge, memory, that it doesn't know what it is to be alone. And one is afraid to be alone. Because to be alone implies, does it not, that one has to be outside society. You may live in society, but one has to be an outsider to society. And to be an outsider to society, one has to be free of society. Society demands that you act according to an idea. That's all society knows. That's all human beings know. Conform, imitate, accept, obey. And when one accepts the edicts of tradition, conforms to the pattern which society has set up, which is human beings have set up, then you are part of this whole conditioned human existence, which wastes its energy through constant effort, constant conflict, confusion, misery. And is it possible for human beings to be free of this confusion, of this conflict? And essentially, this conflict is between the action and what the action should be. And one observes within oneself, as one must, how conflict constantly drains energy. And the whole social structure, which is to be competitive, aggressive, comparing oneself with another, accepting an ideology, a belief, and so on, all that is based on conflict. Not only within oneself, but also outwardly. And we say if there is no conflict within oneself, a struggle, a battle, we shall become like animals. We shall become lazy, which is not actual fact. We do not know any other kind of life than the life we live, which is the constant struggle from the moment we are born till we die. That's all we know. And as one observes it, one can see what a wastage of energy it is. And one must extricate oneself from this social disorder, from this social immorality. Which means one must be alone. Though one may live in society, you're no longer accepting the values, the structure, the brutality, the envy, the jealousy, the competitive spirit. Therefore you are alone. And when you are alone, you are mature. Maturity is not of age. And that's what is happening throughout the world. There is a revolt. But that revolt is not the understanding of the whole structure of society, which is yourself. That revolt is fragmentary. That is, one may revolt against this particular war, or fight, go to war, kill another for your favorite war. Or be a religious believer belonging to one group, Catholic, Protestant, Hindu, what you will. Or a particular culture, a particular group. But to revolt means to revolt against the whole structure, not a particular fragment of that, against a particular fragment of that culture. But to understand this whole structure, one must first be aware of it. One must first look at it, become conscious of it. That is, to be choicelessly aware of it. You can't choose a particular part of that society and say, I like this, I don't like that. This pleases me and that does not please me. Then you are merely conforming to a particular pattern and resisting the other patterns. Therefore you are still caught in the struggle. So what is important is to be first, see the picture of this whole human existence, the daily existence of our life, to see it, not as an idea, not as a concept, but actually be aware of it, as one is aware when one is hungry. Hunger is not an idea, it's not a concept, it is a fact. In the same way, to see this confusion, this misery, this constant, endless struggle, to be choicelessly aware of this whole thing. Then in that, if you are choicelessly aware of this fact, then there is no conflict at all. Then you are outside the social structure you have, because the mind has extricated itself from the absurdities of society. Because you have ideals, you are aggressive. Because you have beliefs, dogmas, belonging to certain groups and communities, you are violent. So, is it possible to look, to observe oneself, because oneself is the human being, oneself is the social structure, oneself is the entity that has brought about this social disorder. And is it possible to look at oneself not analytically, but just to observe, so that when you observe without any choice, then you begin to understand the total nature of this structure. And in that understanding, there is action, which is not based on a formula. It's a total action. And that is the state of maturity. And we are not mature. We are more or less unbalanced people. After all, the extreme form of unbalance is the man who believes he is something who is not, or so identified himself with an ideal. He is not capable of living. And we are, most of us, probably 99.9, we are, if I may say so, rather unbalanced. Because we are pursuing ideals that have no value at all. And because we are idealists, therefore we are violent. You belong to one ideal group and another, and there is war. So, when one is aware, in that sense in which there is no choice whatsoever, then out of that action comes which is not fragmentary, You don't love and hate. There is only then a quality of love that is not touched by hate, anger, jealousy, envy. And to come upon that, one has to have great energy. You know, man, that is each one of us, wherever we live, we want to find a state of mind, a state of life, a living, which is not a travail, which is not a battle. I'm sure all of us, however lowly or however intellectual we are, we want to find a way of life that is orderly, full of beauty and great love. That's been the search of man for millions of years. And instead of finding it, he has externalized it, put it out there, created gods, saviors, priests, and they with their ideas. And so he has missed the whole issue. And one must deny all that. Deny totally the acceptance that there is heaven through another, or by following another. Nobody in the world or in heaven can give you that life. One has to work for it endlessly. And in understanding this whole business of existence, this life that is so painful, one must also ask, what is the meaning of life? What is it all about? We are educated badly. We are trained for a particular job, a livelihood. Then we slip into a family. Then the struggle, endlessly. Is that what human beings live for? Is that all of life? Therefore, we invent a theory of God, a theory of an otherness. There is something beyond this life, or there is something in us which is the true divinity, and so on, so on, so on, which are absolute, not facts. Facts are our daily life. And one must deny all the structure that we have invented in order to escape from our daily life. It is in the daily life that we have to bring a change, not in some ideological future world. So one has to ask oneself, What is it all about? What do we live for? What is the meaning of life? The meaning of life is not according to the theoreticians, the theologians. They are so conditioned by their belief, by their experience, by their tethered to a particular church group, they cannot possibly see the meaning of life. We have to see it for ourselves, not according to somebody else. So one has to ask this question. What is it all about? What is the meaning of life? Is there a meaning of life at all? Or there is only this life of struggle, battle, despair, sorrow and endless confusion? Man has asked this question. This isn't the first time we are asking. Man has asked it, and not finding the meaning, invents a meaning. Gives a significance to life. That is the intellectual trick, giving significance to life. But to find out for oneself what the significance, what the meaning of life is, without inventing a meaning, then one finds out for oneself if there is or if there is not. Therefore one has to neither accept nor reject. That is, one has to be totally negative to find out. Do please see this point, if I may point out. To see anything clearly, the mind must be empty. To see even the leaf of a tree, if the mind is chattering, thinking of other things, problems, full of ideas, knowledge, then it never sees the beauty, the loveliness of a leaf. The same way, to see the deep meaning, if there is any meaning at all, the mind must be emptied of its own conditioning. That is, can the brain cells, which have been so conditioned for millions and millions of years, biologically, anthropologically, can that brain, so heavily conditioned, can it be utterly quiet? So that it can see something new. So one has, in asking that question, whether there is a meaning to life at all, to find the answer for oneself, the mind of which the brain is, the brain itself has to be extraordinarily quiet. That is the old brain. The old brain which is so conditioned, which says, I am a Catholic, I am a Protestant, I am a Dutchman, I am a Hindu, and all that idiotic nonsense. That's the old brain, so heavily conditioned, that responds. And therefore, to find out the significance, if there is, that whole brain must be quiet. And that is part of meditation. Not to suppress it. You can't suppress it. You can't alter it. You can't change it. But you can see, if you are aware choicelessly, how the old brain is always interfering, always responding immediately, according to its conditioning. If you are aware choicelessly of it, then you will see it becomes fairly quiet. There is an interval between the challenge and the response. When there is the response to any challenge, it is the old mind that responds immediately. And when you are aware, without any interference, therefore choicelessly, of this fact, then you will say that the old brain becomes extraordinarily quiet. And that is the whole meaning of meditation. And that word has been so spoiled by exploiters, or by those people who have particular system which they want to thrust upon others, which means they don't know what meditation means at all. So, to find out if there is a significance to this life which is so full of sorrow and misery, with an occasional flutter of happiness and delight, one has to put that question in all seriousness to oneself. And you will find the answer only when the old brain is not made tranquil by drugs, by tricks. And that is when that is quiet, you will find that there is a meaning. And in the discovery of that meaning, the observer who is the center, the ego, the me, the personality, the entity that gathers character unto itself as the thinker, the observer, the experiencer, comes to an end. You know, that's one of the most extraordinary facts of life, that our consciousness, our mental condition is very narrow, is very limited. Because we think in fragments. And being aware of its limitation, we try through various forms to expand that limitation. By reading, by taking drugs, through various experiences, psychedelic expansions through various forms of chemicals. Because we realize our minds are so extraordinarily limited, so petty, shallow, everlastingly offering opinions, judgments. And one realizes that. And so one says, is it possible to go beyond this limitation? And the danger of it is, we invent a God. And all gods are man's inventions. The saviors, the gurus, those who say we know and you don't know. But if you reject all that completely, then you will find for yourself that there is tremendous significance to life. Not an invented significance. Then we will know what love is. Then we'll know what action is and what virtue is. Virtue is not harsh. Virtue is order. And that order cannot possibly come about through harshness, which the priests have done throughout life and imposed it upon people, that one must live a harsh life, which is called austerity, to find reality. Obviously, one must lead an austere life, but that austerity is not born out of harshness. It comes naturally, easily, through understanding. And to understand this whole life is to be choicelessly aware of it. And then you will see for yourself, if you go that far, and you must go that far, because our house, our life are being destroyed. And to put an end to all that, one must, in daily life, be so intensely, choicelessly aware, so that all conflict comes to an end, and out of that there is an aloneness which gives an abundance of energy. And therefore in that energy brings a radical revolution at the deep inner level. And then perhaps, if you are lucky, and strange thing it is that you cannot possibly invite reality. You cannot invite the whole heavens and the beauty of the earth. All that you have to do is to leave the window open and let that beauty, that love come. But to leave the window, you must have order. And therefore deny this total disorder of life, of this society which man has created. And only when there is this complete inward order, then the one comes upon that immeasurable reality. We've got 5 minutes more, or 7 minutes more. Do you think it would be worthwhile to ask questions? Just a minute, sir, before you ask a question. Just a minute, sir. I know we have many questions, because we must question everything, doubt everything, including what the speaker has said. That's the only way to find out, because that's the only way to be free. But to ask a question, the question must be the right question. Because we never ask right questions, the essential questions. And that's one of the most difficult things to do. Because to ask a right question, you must have also gone into the question yourself. And when you have gone into the question very deeply, you have already answered it. But if you wait for another to answer that question, however right it is, it will be only verbal, which means you have not worked upon it yourself, gone into it, explored it. So one must ask the right question. And the right question will always find the right answer, not from another. The other is merely a sounding board. And therefore the sounding board is not important. You know that word guru, which is so misused all over the world, means the one who points out. And like a post on the roadside, it points out the direction. And you don't build a shrine round that post. You don't put garlands around it. You don't worship it. You don't obey it. You don't give respect to it. You look at it and pass by. And when the post becomes important, then you are lost. Then you are exploited. So we must, in asking questions, and we need a great deal of intelligence, not intellect. Intelligence comes with maturity. And maturity is that state of mind which is completely alone. And one doesn't say the enormous beauty of being alone. One is afraid of it. Love is alone. And therefore it is incorruptible. All right, sir. This doesn't mean, sir, if I may point out, it doesn't mean I'm preventing you from asking questions. Only we are just giving a warning. Yes, sir. What is the best attitude? Hostility. What is the best attitude towards hostility and bestiality? I wonder what we mean by attitude. Why do we want an attitude? What does attitude mean? A position. Taking up a position. Coming to a conclusion. I have an attitude about whatever it is. which is I have come to a conclusion after study, after examining, after probing into the question, I have come to this point, to this attitude, which means that very assumption of an attitude is resistance, and therefore that itself is violence. If we cannot have an attitude towards violence or hostility, that means you are interpreting it according to your particular conclusion, fancy, imagination, understanding. That's what we are saying. Is it possible to look at this hostility in oneself, this creating enmity in oneself, this violence, this brutality in oneself without any attitude, to see the fact as it is? Moment you have an attitude, you have already prejudiced, you have taken a side. And therefore you are not looking. You are not understanding that fact within yourself. So, sir, to look at oneself without any attitude, without any opinion, judgment, evaluation, is one of the most arduous tasks. That means, in looking so clearly, there is clarity. And it's that clarity, which is not a conclusion, not an attitude, that dispels this total structure of brutality and hostility. Have I stopped you all from asking questions? I hope not.
I read a great deal what you have said in your books, and in these books you use terms as to be aware, emptiness, to listen. Also, you have used these terms this evening.
Sir, I'm afraid, sir, I can't hear. And would you make it brief, sir?
If we understand, for instance, to listen, with your whole being, do you understand the other expression?
If we understand what it is to listen with our whole being, do we understand everything else you're talking about too?
Do we understand anything if we give our heart and mind? Is that it, sir?
You've mentioned many things in your talks. One of the things you have mentioned is listening with our whole being. If we understand listening with our whole being, does that mean that we understand everything else you say also?
Obviously. If we listen with our whole being to any problem, because, sir, look, all problems are related to one problem. There is no one problem and other problems. All problems, human problems, are interrelated. And when I understand completely one problem, I've understood all problems. If I understand the problem of envy, I'm taking that as an example. Understand it, which is not intellectually examining it and probing it, coming to a conclusion and saying it's right or wrong or whatever it is, but to understand it. That means to listen to that problem. And you cannot possibly listen to that problem if your mind is not quiet. So when you understand one problem, however deep that is, or however superficial it be, and that problem is related to all other problems, then if you listen to it quietly, without any choice, be aware of it, you will see that you will begin to understand and transcend all problems. I think that's enough, isn't it, sir?
May I ask one question? Is it better not to do a kindness when it is only done for duty without love?
If there is no love, but you do out of duty some kindly action, is it worthwhile? Need you ask that question? Need one reply to that question? You know, that word duty is a terrible word. We use that word only when there is no love. And a heart that loves has no duty and no responsibility. Then do what you will. Do whatever you will when there is love. There is responsibility. But if it is a responsibility born out of duty and there is no love, it's the most awful action because it brings confusion and misery. I'm afraid one has to stop.